back, everybody. It's Fiera Luna back again. Today, what we're going to do is learn the basic stitches to get you started with crochet. So I'll be teaching you the chain stitch, the single crochet, the half double crochet, the double crochet, the treble crochet, and the slip stitch, which are the most common stitches that you'll see in most patterns. Now, a word of warning, in the UK, stitches have different names. I use US notation because it's how I was taught. But if you come across a pattern and it seems a little bit strange, double check to see if it's written in UK or US terms. It may sound confusing right now, but I promise I'll make sure you've got what you need when the time comes, so that you can save yourself a little frustration. So, we're going to start by making a slip knot. Now, there are lots of ways to do this. If you already know how to make a slip knot, carry on doing it just like how you were taught. The way that I do a slip knot is I wrap the yarn around my finger, and I wrap it around a second time. I pull the first loop over the second one, and then I pull the second loop over the first one, and pull it right through. Pull on this tail at the end, and that makes me a slip knot. See? Now what you want to do next is put that around your hook, just like that. And then you give it a tug. If you tug on this tail end, it'll loosen up a little bit. And if you tug on this end here, it'll tighten. All right. Now, before we make our very first stitch, you want to make sure that your hook and your yarn are comfortable in your hands. I hold my hook kind of like you would hold a pencil. Some people will hold their hook like you'd hold a knife. That's okay. Either one's fine. You can hold the hook however you want as long as it's comfortable for you. Now, I do something called tatting, so I hold my yarn in tatter's hand position, which means I tension off of this finger, and I hold my work between my thumb and my forefinger. Proper crochet hand position holds the work in between these two fingers and uses this one to tension. So you would hold it here like this, and then to yarn over, you would use this finger and kind of get over the top. I find it a little awkward because I don't crochet that way, but you will see most people doing it that way. You can hold it any way you'd like, once again, as long as it's comfortable. So, are we all comfortable now? Excellent. The next thing that you'll want to do with your yarn is we're going to start by making some chain stitches. So you yarn over your hook like that. You just wrap it around, up and around, and then you use this to catch the yarn and you pull it through this loop. Oop, right through. And then you've got your very first chain stitch. That motion again, whoops, better untangle that just a little tiny bit. That motion again looks like this. You bring it over your hook, you give it a pull through, and you pull it through that little loop. Now don't tug too tightly on these. You're going to have to come back and work into them. So you want to make sure that these are something that you can get your hook back into. You'll know that you can because you'll be able to see very clearly that there's this sort of little V shape. And that's also how you count these, by looking for the bottom of the V's. The bottom of the first V is the little slip knot that you made in the first place. So from here, you're going to carry on until you have 8 more of these, and then we'll pick back up from there. Now I'm going to speed the video up so that you don't have to go through me explaining it over again. But if you do need to go through me explaining it over again, you can go right back. Pause the video, slow it down if you need to, and I'll meet you back here once you've got 10. All right. So that's 10 stitches. You've got 10 chains on your hook. You can count them by looking for those little V's again. It looks a little bit like a braid too, kinda. So you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You don't count the one on your hook. The one on your hook isn't really a stitch, it's just the loop that's on there. So you do not get to count that. Now what we're going to do is make something called a turning chain. So you're going to do the same thing again. It's a special chain stitch that doesn't count towards the total number of stitches in your pattern. So even though we've technically got an 11th stitch here, what this is for is to make sure that the yarn is tall enough so that when you turn your work around to work the other way along it, it keeps it from coming undone as you work along the row and makes sure that the yarn is tall enough for you to work back into when you get there to the other side. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to make your very first single crochet, one of the most common stitches around. So, you find the second chain from your hook. This is the first one here. This is the second one. You can kind of give it a little tug if you can't see it very well. You put your hook in. Stick it right through. That's why these had to be loose enough, because you have to be able to get your hook through. Now, this is a little bit different than the chain that you made in the beginning, but you are still going to yarn over just like you did. You pull this through this first little loop. So this yarn here is your chain stitch. You pull this loop through, bring it up, just like that. Now you should have 2 loops on. You should have the one you had when you started and the one you just made. So you're going to yarn over again. And you're going to pull this yarn through here and through here as well. And that is a single crochet. That's your very first one. This is also how you can tell if something is crocheted, because you'll see these little shapes like this instead of knitting, which makes V shapes instead. From there, you want to do the same thing in the next chain. Stick your hook in, whoop, yarn over, pull through, then you've got your 2 loops, and then one more time you yarn over, and you pull that through both loops, and there you go. You've got another double crochet, ooh, or single crochet. Goodness gracious, these are called double crochets in UK sizing. And if you've done this right, you should be able to make 10 of these, because you should have 10 chain stitches along the bottom plus the one we made to turn. So you put this in, and like that. Now, when you get to the very end of this row, you're going to find it might be a little bit difficult to spot your chain stitch, and that's okay. That's normal. You're going to see that happen, especially when you're brand new. You might find that your original chain stitch has tightened up a little bit, or tightened up a little bit more than you meant for it to, because every time you work into these, they tighten a little. But that's okay. All you need to do when you get to the end is give it a little bit of a tug, and you should be able to spot it. Now, I'm working with super bulky yarn and a size 10 hook, but you can work with any size you want. I'm just making it really big so that it makes it easy for you to see what's going on. This is the last chain stitch here. It's right here. So you can kind of see where that hole is. Put your hook in, and there you go. All right, now you have 10 single crochets. You can count from the top, or you can count by what's called the posts. It's hard to see the post on a single crochet, but it is there. Normally, if I'm counting, I'll count from the top. And what we're doing is the same thing we did last time. We're counting those V shapes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the 10th one here. This obviously is not a stitch, because it's what's around our hook to begin with. All right, now we're going to do the same thing we did last time. We're going to make a chain, just like that. That is a turning chain. Now, you have to be a little bit careful not to work into your turning chain. So you can see that your turning chain is right here. This is your first crochet stitch here. It can be a little tricky to tell which ones are which, but it gets a little bit easier when you turn your work because you can kind of see that the turning chain is not a real full stitch and you can move it around, where with this you can't. So now what we're going to do, now that we're finished the single crochets, is I'm going to show you how to do the half doubles. So what you do is before you put your hook in, you yarn over so that you've got 2 on the hook. Then you insert your hook into your single crochet from before. Then you pull a loop through just like you did. And then from there, you yarn over again. And you've got 3 on your hook. For a half double, you just take this and pull it through all 3. Boom! You've got a half double crochet. And then you do that again. Yarn over. Insert into the whole stitch. Make sure you've got both sides of that little V down there. You yarn over. Pull that through. Yarn over. And pull it through all 3. And then you just keep going like that. You yarn over, push her in, and then through all 3. Ooh, there we go. And then you just carry on like this. Now, I will tell you right now, I often accidentally make half double crochets into double crochets because I just do that. So don't worry if that's a thing that you do. You can always pull crochet work out. It's very easy to pull back out. Oh, like I started to there. I almost started to make a double crochet. That's normal. It's going to happen. Once you get into a rhythm of things, sometimes you just make the wrong stitch, and that's okay. There we go. And then we're almost back around. And now you can see that we're just about back around. And this is your first stitch from that bottom row. Just make sure that you've got both sides of it, because it can be very tricky to get into both sides of your first single crochet. If you're not sure where you are, that's all right. Take a quick look at the top, and you can count across. Ooh, that one's a little bit messy. And you can count across, you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can see the lines running between them. So, what we're going to do for this next row is we're going to make 2 chain stitches to turn. And that is because a double crochet is a much taller stitch. So you yarn over, and then pull through, yarn over, and then pull through. And now we're going to work back the other way. So, as you can see from me trying to make a double crochet out of a half double, you yarn over first, you insert your hook, you yarn over again, pull that through your half double from the last round. Now, what we're going to do here can be a little tricky if you're just starting out, but you yarn over, you pull through these 2 loops here, but not the last one. And then you yarn over again and pull through this last one. And that will make you a double crochet. And you can see now that this stitch is taller than the ones below it. That's why we needed 2 chains here instead of just the single one from below. So, one more time, you yarn over, you insert your hook, yarn over, pull through. Now you've got 3 loops on your hook, yarn over again, pull through your first 2 loops, and then pull through these, and that's a double. Now you'll see that the double crochets look a little bit looser, and that's because there's tall and there's more space between them. Rather, they make more space between them. I will show you in a moment how to count by posts, because double crochets have really easy to find posts, just like treble crochets will. There is a half treble, sort of, We don't really use it for anything. You just normally go straight from double to treble. But some US patterns may call for it anyway, especially if they're specialty patterns or you're making something like lace or yarn sculptures. They might call for it. UK has a half treble, but that's because they list their sizing differently than we do. There we go. And this is your stitch from the last round, right there. It's a little tricky to see, but you can always just give it a little tug if you're not sure where it is. And we work into that. A little tricky to get into, but we work into it. There we go. And up we go. So now we've got double crochets. So I will show you how the post works. So you can count by the top of the stitch, just like I do, most of the time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and this is 10. Or you can count by the post. So that what I mean is this thing here, this long tall thing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. This last one is not a post, that's just the turning chain. So from here, we're going to move on to making treble crochets. You're going to want to chain 3 for a treble. 1, 2, 3. They're quite tall stitches. You can chain 2 if you want to. It just might make your first treble look a little bit funky. It depends on how you like the edge of your material to be. So what you do is you yarn over once, you yarn over a second time, and your hook gets a little bit crowded like mine. Then you insert your hook into that first double crochet from our previous round. Yarn over again and pull through. Yarn over, pull through these first 2. So you now have 3 left on your hook. Pull through these next 2. And I'm sure you're sensing a pattern here. You pull through these last 2. And that is a treble crochet. They are quite tall. So we're going to do that same thing again. Yarn over and again. Insert your hook into that part there. Make sure you've got it in there under both sets of yarn. Yarn over, pull through, and then once, twice, and 3 times. And you can remember it because it's a treble crochet, so it's 3. And there we go. Treble crochets have quite a bit of space between them, so they're most often used for making tall posts in lace. You can also use them in some types of blankets, depending on how big your yarn is and how much space you want in between things. You can also use them for patterns that call for sort of special edges. But that's mostly what you'll see these used for. They work up very, very quickly because they're big and tall. There we go. And it's really easy to see the post on a treble. Like, look at that. That's huge. You can immediately see the post on a treble crochet. They'll also give you a very open weave if you want something that's sort of big, but has that openness to it. You also will use treble crochet for certain special stitches. I find it's easiest to do something called cabling with treble crochets. Cabling is something that you can do to make those cool double helix patterns that you see on some old-timey sweaters and things like that. And treble crochet lends itself really well to that. Whoops. There we go. And that's just me tugging on the yarn on the side. My yarn comes from a center feeding ball, so sometimes I have to give it a little bit of tug. There's many types of ways to wind yarn. Some balls of yarn are just wound up like a cartoon ball of yarn, like you would see in old Looney Tunes sketches. Some yarn balls are center feeding, so the yarn pulls out of the center and the ball doesn't move around. And some are a little bit different than that. They're in a yarn cake form, and you can pull either from the center of a yarn cake or from the outside, and it won't really move around too much. All right. And that's the last of our trebles. So, you may be wondering, on this next row, why I didn't choose to start with it. And the reason I didn't choose to start with slip stitches is because slip stitches are very small, and you can't really work back into them. Some patterns will ask you to work back into them, but those patterns are normally lace, or they're doing something special or strange. Slip stitches are not normally something you would work your way back into. But I will show you how to make them because they're very good for doing the edges of certain patterns, especially if you want a pattern like to go all the way around to make a pattern nice and even. So the way it works is you're going to chain one here. It doesn't really need this height, but you're going to chain one. Just like a single crochet, you are going to insert your hook, just like that. Yarn over, pull this through. But instead of doing what a single crochet does, you're not going to make another loop. You're just going to pull this straight through like this. It's a little bit tricky to do, but you'll know that you've got it because it'll feel a little bit tight. So what you do is you insert your hook, yarn over, pull that single loop through, and pull it up. You have to be careful with these because a slip stitch has a tendency to get way tighter than you ever expected it to. So what you see me doing here is sort of leaning my hook a little bit so that the stitch doesn't tighten up completely. You might want it to tighten a little bit if your stitch tension is looser than mine, and let's face it, your stitch tension is probably looser than mine because mine is on the very high end of tight. And then like that. And I'll show you what this looks like when we get to the other side. And now here we are back again. This is hard to tell, but this is your last treble. This is the top of your last treble. The rest of this is turning chain that you don't need to work into. It can be tricky to tell that stuff. That's why you often will want a stitch marker. All right. So slip stitches look a little bit different. They tend to make, instead of you being able to see them clean on the top, they tend to sort of come out looking like they're on the side. That's why they're really good for doing the edges of squares or dishcloths or whatever, and they really help even it out. When we start making things like dishcloths, I'll show you how these can be used to even out the edge of a square and make it look kind of nice. I'll also show you something called the crab stitch, which is a little more advanced, but by the time we get there, you'll know what you're doing. All right. So that's all the stitches I have to teach you today. I'm going to teach you one more thing that's very important because I'm not going to keep this around. I'm not going to cut this yarn. So if you are partway through a project and you want to save it, all you need to do is pull your hook up to make a nice big loop. Whoop. Fasten something in this loop so that it won't come out. Whatever that is, it doesn't matter necessarily what it is, but fasten something in that loop so that it won't come out, and then you can come back to your work anytime. Because if you don't fasten something in there, or rather if you don't like how your work has come out or you want to take it out for some reason, all you need to do is take this loop and pull. And you can completely unravel your work that way. Slip stitches are a little bit tricky to do that with, but you can completely unravel your work. Whoops. Oh, even the camera wants to unravel today. Come on back in. You can do it, camera. So yeah, if you're just practicing like this, you can undo it. Now, make sure that you do your very best to practice. This gets easier the more that you do it. I've done this for a long, long time, so I have a lot of practice doing this, but I still practice pretty often. Be kind to yourself when you make mistakes. You watched me try to make a double crochet out of a half double crochet while I was trying to teach you. You're going to be new at this, though, so you're going to make a few more than I do, and that's okay. Crochet is hard to learn. It's tricky to pick up sometimes. It can be really weird if you're not used to it. That's all right. It's okay to make mistakes. You're new at this. It's a little bit tricky. But you know what? The more that you practice, the more that you try, the better you're going to do. So, do your very best to keep practicing. I know it can be difficult sometimes, but as long as you keep trying, you're going to get it eventually. For now, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and of course, be excellent to each other. Bye!